So we were on the phone with the midwife, and as soon as I told her I needed to push, she was like, "You need to call 911." And when she said that, my husband was actually on the phone with my mom trying to figure out how close she was so we could get out the door and go to the hospital. And he literally hung up on my mom. My mom was freaking out at the time, like, what the heck is going on? And he calls 911. And in this time, I'm having contractions. I'm having the urge to push. And he's on the phone being coached by the 911 operator on how to catch the baby.
Hi, I'm Kayla Heater, follower of Jesus, wife and mother of 5 children, Christian childbirth educator and doula, and your host of the Surrendered Birth Stories podcast, where we share God-centered birth stories, evidence-based birth education, and our pursuit of surrendering our birth plans to God. Let's get started. Happy Monday, everyone. Happy Martin Luther King Jr. Day. Happy Inauguration Day. Happy National Championship for College Football Day. Unexpected twist and turn there. If you listened to this podcast, I think it was the week after Thanksgiving, I expressed to you how sad I was about the Ohio State football team losing to Michigan, because in my mind, I thought that was it. That's the end of the season now. Maybe they'll get a bowl game, but no more national championship, no more Big Ten conference, no more all that. I was just kind of like, that game sort of lost it all for them. But then didn't realize they changed the rules for how they determined who was going to be in the national championship. They used to do it, I think the top 4 teams used to face off in a sort of pregame, and then whoever won those went to the national championship. Well, apparently this year it was the top 8 teams, and somehow we were number 8 after that big loss. And so we made it in. I didn't even realize this was happening because, I have 5 kids and I'm not really focused on sports past Thanksgiving, but didn't even know this was happening. And turns out they won their 2 games they needed to get into the national championship, which I wish I would have watched, because the last game I watched, they lose terribly. So I am planning on watching this national championship game with Ohio State and Notre Dame. Although I joked with my husband, I was like, but now look, I'll watch and they'll lose because I'm watching. Because the last 2 games I didn't watch, they won. And the last game I did watch, they lost. So sorry, Ohio State. Maybe I'll just glance at the TV every now and then. And if you start losing, I'll walk away. Anyways, I hope that your week is off to a great start. Hope this January, this new year, is treating you well. We have our spring childbirth class signups going on right now. So if you are in the Triad area and you are expecting a baby this summer, please sign up for our class, whether it's your first baby, second baby, third baby. If you've never taken this class with me and you're in the Triad and you have a baby due this summer, please come take this course. It'll be in April mostly. I think we might start the very last week of March, maybe March 30th. But we have lots of learning to do, and it's been so fun teaching couple after couple and then seeing their babies being born and having them come back and tell me how everything went. It's been just so much fun. I love teaching this class. It's my favorite thing to do. So please reach out if you are local and you would like to take this course because you've got a summer baby due this summer. Also, my husband is working diligently on getting the on-demand online course up and running. We finished a lot of it, but we still have some more to go. We got a little derailed. It was supposed to be done by the end of the year, and then the last couple months of the year, a couple of personal things happened in our life that just sort of derailed our extra time to do that. So doing an online course is a huge undertaking. So he is chipping away at it. We are getting there. And I promise as soon as I have an official release date for that, I will let you know so that you can tell all your friends and family and whoever who don't live in the Triad of North Carolina so that they can take the on-demand online course. Or even if they do live here and their schedule never works out to come to our in-person class, I get that too. Okay, let's get into this week's episode. Everything can seem like it's going perfectly when you get pregnant quickly, are having no complications, and feel well. But for Sidney and her husband, everything changed at her anatomy scan. Getting diagnosed with a severe heart condition for her son in utero turned her world upside down and would play a major role into how her birth would unfold, as well as how her postpartum and life in general would go following his delivery. A few years later, after life had gotten into a groove, they would welcome their baby girl, but with a bit of an unexpected twist from God. Welcome to another episode of Surrendered Birth Stories. I am your host, Kayla Heater, and I have Miss Sidney with me today. Sidney, take a second. Tell us who you are, about your life. Let us get to know you a little bit.
All right. So my name is Sidney Turner, and my husband and I met at Western Carolina University back in 2016. It was like forever ago, basically. We've been married for 6 years this past October. We moved down to the coast of North Carolina in 2019. My husband accepted a job at Cherry Point. He works as an avionics engineer, and I'm a stay-at-home mom to two wonderful, sometimes rambunctious kiddos, which is a full-time job. It's literally a full-time job.
Especially with the two little
Yes.
ones. To me, that's the hardest phase when both are really young like that. And you don't
Mm-hmm.
have like an older child yet to jump in and pitch in. So,
Mm-hmm.
or to keep the other one entertained so you can focus on the baby. So for us, that was definitely the hardest phase. But let's get into your stories. So take us back to your first pregnancy. What was it like? What was it like getting pregnant with him? How did that all happen?
So my husband and I always, before we got married, we had the kid talk and everything, and we knew we wanted kids. We eloped in 2018 and then had a big wedding in 2019. And during that time, Drew graduated, we moved, we had lots of life events happening during that time. So we decided to wait for a little while. I think it was about 3.5, almost 4 years into our marriage that we decided to start trying. So we started trying in July of 2021. Drew actually had a work event in Yuma, Arizona, and this was in August, and I took a pregnancy test, and I found I was pregnant. So I got pregnant really fast, a lot faster than I thought I would. And of course, my husband was like, the trying period didn't happen it wasn't like very long. So he was like excited, but also like a little disappointed because he was like hoping that it would last long. I was like, of course you would say that. But yes, we were very blessed to get pregnant very quickly. I've had lots of friends who have a harder time getting pregnant. So I'm very thankful and blessed that we were able to get pregnant pretty quickly. So that was in August of 2021. And then we told family, I think like a week later that I found out. And that was Labor Day weekend. So we celebrated my birthday and then my grandmother's birthday. And then I told them with a little onesie. I gave a little gift to my mom because her birthday was August, and I gave it to her. I was like, here's a late birthday gift. And she opened it, and it was a onesie, and it said family of 5 because we have 2 dogs. So adding another person to the house. So it was like family of 5. And everybody was super excited because this is the first grandbaby on my side of the family.
Mm.
It was definitely some wonderful moments to think back on.
Oh. So then how did the pregnancy go? Was it smooth? Everything good for you, your health? Was there anything happening during the pregnancy, like concerning you at all?
So the first trimester, I was nauseous a little bit, but nothing that like kept me from doing my normal day. I was working full time as a office assistant, so I was able to go to work. Wasn't like throwing up or anything, just occasional nauseous, and I'd like take drink some Sprite and eat a couple of crackers, and I'd be good. All of the trimesters were really good. I didn't have any sickness. It just everything was basically normal for me. Wise, no blood pressure issues. Everything was really smooth for myself. It was at the 18 week. Like I went to a normal OBGYN. we were doing the anatomy scan, and we immediately found out that it was a boy, of course, because it was the first thing you saw right at the ultrasound. He was ready to show it off. And yeah, at 18 weeks, they told us there was a couple of complications. She had me stand up and like move around a couple times and start jumping to get baby in different positions so she could get a better view of the heart. She wouldn't say anything, and my husband and I were, first time parents, a little, I wouldn't say oblivious, but first time we just didn't know what to expect. We just thought, okay, maybe baby's in a weird position and she's just trying to get like a certain view of the heart or just something going on. So we were brought back to a room, and the OB/GYN came in and she basically told us that the heart doesn't look normal. And I was trying to ask, like, questions like, "What do you mean it doesn't look normal? What is it showing?" And she was like, "I'm not at liberty to say because it's not my expertise." Of course, I broke down and started crying because, I mean, you don't wanna hear the news of your first baby having some sort of complication, so
It's okay. Take as long as you need. It's very emotional.
I didn't know I'd start crying at this part. I thought I'd be, like, further down the road with this story, but I guess not. Ugh,
Well, this is the moment in the story where everything changed for you.
yeah, that is absolutely true. Okay. She told us that we would be referred to a specialist at ECU. And I think it was 2 or 3 weeks later after we had the anatomy scan, we both pondered whether to tell family and friends, like just the little bit of news that we knew about the heart. But we did just so that people would pray that it was like nothing, that it's just like some little mishap, like in the ultrasound, they didn't really see anything, that it was everything was gonna be okay. So we did tell family and friends a little bit about that, and they prayed for us, and we prayed about it all the way up until we got to the specialist at ECU. We did an hour-long echocardiogram, a fetal echocardiogram. So I sat on the table and laid there for almost an hour while they moved the ultrasound around, looking at the heart and everything. And we were brought into another room, and a pediatric cardiologist, his name is Dr. Steed, wonderful, wonderful man, very faith driven, thankfully. Very blessed for that reason. And he sat us down and he told us that our son had HLHS, which is hypoplastic left heart syndrome. It basically means that the left side of his heart was not developing, whereas the right side of his heart was. So I was working a lot harder to pump the oxygen and the blood through. So, yeah, sitting down and talking with him, it was a lot of information at once. Just learning that we knew that our son would need 3 surgeries within the first 5 years of his life, open heart surgeries, and that there's a chance that he could even be put on the transplant list. So yeah, it was a lot of information to really take in. At first, my husband was like really diving in and doing all the research on HLHS. For myself, I was not necessarily in denial, but just did not want to do any research. I just wanted to listen to what the specialists are talking about, like the surgeries he would need, his life expectancy outside of the womb, just not wanting to go on a bunny rabbit trail of looking, like Googling everything, because I was just like, I can't do that. That's you. My husband's a researcher and that's what he enjoys to do. So by all means, that's what he did. And it took a while for us to like really sit down and have a good conversation about our son's diagnosis. So after learning that he had HLHS, that was in December of 2021. And then I continued to go to ECU up until I think March. And in March, I transferred my care to Duke because it's what they normally do is well, with HLHS, and I'm sure with other top priority heart surgeries, they transfer you to Duke because Duke is well known for cardiology and their surgeries. So March of 2022, I transferred care to Duke. So I was traveling up there about once a month to do ultrasounds and more fetal echoes and just making sure everything was okay with him. So I did that up until April. I moved in with my parents. So I'm originally from Alamance County. I grew up in Alamance County. And my sister lives in Alamance County, and my parents live in Orange County. They live in Hurdle Mills, which is about 30 minutes from Duke. So that's why I moved. I stayed with my parents for an entire month of April, hoping that maybe I would go into labor or, things would be natural and I could, go into labor and I could just dart over to Duke and be like 30 minutes instead of 3.5 hours because we were living in Beaufort, North Carolina at the time. So that was like a 3.5 hour drive. So I lived with them for almost a month.
So I'm assuming then you said hoping that you would go into labor. So I'm assuming you did not go into labor,
No, I did not go into labor.
or at least not on their timeline, I guess.
No. So when we found out that Caleb had HLHS, we were told that most of the time that they preferred to do an induction because they like to do it on their time. I guess Duke and them like to know when baby is born, and then normally they have their surgeries between 2 to 5 days old. So my due date was May 3rd. It was the beginning of April. They told me this is your date for your induction, and my induction date was April 28th. So my husband came from Beaufort and met us at lunch beforehand because, you're not really supposed to eat when you go in the hospital and have a baby. So I went into the hospital at 3 p.m. and I didn't really officially get started on my induction until 8 p.m. that night because it just took so long to get everything started between getting an IV into me, which is very easy to stick me. However, the nurse that was sticking me was not doing a very good job, and she had to call somebody else to come do it, which was crazy. We did the Pitocin, we did the Foley bulb, which was very painful. Took 3 tries to get it, or 3 different tries between 12 and 1 a.m. Friday morning. I was at 4 centimeters, so they were able to pull it out. And between 1 a.m. and like 4 a.m., I labored as long as I could. Finally made it to 5 centimeters. And then they're like, if you want to go ahead and get an epidural, you can. I'm like, okay, I'll go ahead and get the epidural before it gets too intense. So I went ahead and got an epidural. And then I basically, from like, I guess 5 and 6 a.m., all that Friday, honestly, is a big blur. I've even asked my husband, I was like, what were we doing? Like, I know I was like probably in different positions trying to get labor moving along. So all day long, Friday, I was in labor. I wasn't able to get out of bed. I laid in bed, tried different positions. And then I think it was like 9 and 10 p.m. I was finally at like 8 or 9 centimeters and my epidural came undone.
Like it came out.
I didn't come out. It just like came unconnected somehow. Like, I don't know how to explain it. I didn't get to see it. My husband kind of saw it. I was like in so much pain.
Wow.
Yeah, I was in so much pain. I felt like my tailbone was being crushed, literally being crushed. And I was crying, and my husband was like telling me, he's like, well, push the button so that you can get the juices and get everything like getting all better. I was like, I have been pushing it. It's not working. My mom was in the room at the time. It was me, my mom, and Drew all in the room for the labor and delivery. And my mom eventually went and got my nurse, and she was like, it's not working. So the nurse got the anesthesiologist, and she came back in and fixed it. And I think it was like 10, 15 minutes later that I could finally feel some relief. Because of the position that I was in on the hospital bed, it was just so uncomfortable. Like I couldn't get comfortable, and every time I felt like I had to push, I couldn't push. It was just like it was a whole mess between everything that was going on. And then I was also had monitors, 2 different monitors on my belly. So anytime I moved, they would like move all
Shift.
around and
Yeah.
shift, and then a nurse would have to come readjust it because they had to have a monitor on baby's heart because with the Pitocin that's going through my body, it can affect his heart rate and my heart rate. And it was just so crazy thinking back and looking back now on that. I'm like, why did I agree to this? Like, why did I agree to do this induction? If I could go back and do it again, I would have said, "No, we're not doing an induction. We're just gonna wait for this baby to come, and I will stay at my parents' house, which is 30 minutes away, and I will be here when I'm actually in labor." But, first time mom, we were more focused on baby's health and making sure that he was okay, that it was never occurred to me to think of myself in this pregnancy, like, at all. All of it was just focused on baby, which is perfectly fine, but there were definitely some things I probably would have done differently with my first. But anyways, I think it was midnight that I finally made it to 9, 10 centimeters, and they told me I could start pushing. 4.5 hours later of pushing, he still was not here. And during that time frame, at one point, his heart rate dipped, and a bunch of nurses and doctors came into the room. Were looking at the monitor and like talking to themselves while we're still in labor and trying to push. And at one point, they told me that I might need an emergency C-section, so I had to sign the forms. So I was signing the forms while I was in labor of possibly having a C-section. And I was like, I don't want a C-section. I agreed to an induction, but I do not want a C-section. So, and the doctor he was like, you have like an hour left. If baby's not here in an hour, then we're going to do a C-section. I was like, okay. So this is so crazy. Thinking back now, it's so crazy how fast everything was like just rushed and like they didn't. I mean, I know it was because of his heart that they were more concerned. But thankfully, there was no other problems with his heart dipping. I think it was about 4:30 in the morning on Saturday morning. I was pushing and pushing, and so Caleb's head was literally stuck in my cervix for like 4.5 hours. So when Caleb arrived, he had a huge cone head. Huge cone head. My husband still to this day says that he looked like an alien when he came. So Caleb arrived at 4:45 a.m. on Saturday morning. So in total, I think I was in labor for 36 hours, and it was very traumatic in lots of ways. But we were very thankful that Caleb arrived safely and according to God's will, that he arrived without any major complications, that he had to be rushed off and immediately in surgery. He did not have to do that. We were able to have about 15, maybe 20 minutes of skin to skin and holding him, and then he was taken off to the NICU. 5:30 a.m. is when he was probably taken to the NICU, where he was more like reassessed and listened to his heart and lungs and got him all hooked up to IVs and everything that he need. And during that time, I rested. I kind of went to sleep. I don't think I did get to sleep much after that. I remember the anesthesiologist coming in and asking me questions like, how do you think everything went? Like, would you have an epidural again? I'm like, you're seriously asking me these questions after I gave birth and the epidural came undone? Like, there's no way on earth I would probably ever do another epidural. At this point, like, I was just like, leave me alone. Just leave me alone so I can get some rest. And yeah, it was a lot.
Yeah.
And compared to what I know now, there's definitely a lot of things that I would have done very differently.
Yeah.
Very differently.
So then were you discharged from the hospital? I'm assuming like within a couple of days, and then would you have to just like drive back and forth to go see him?
So Caleb was born at 4:45 a.m. Saturday morning. I stayed all day Saturday, and then I was officially discharged Sunday, like morning or around noonish. And we actually had a Ronald McDonald House.
Oh,
Even though my
nice.
family was only about 30 minutes away, 30, 45 minutes away, we opted to do the Ronald McDonald House because it was right next to the hospital.
Yeah.
So we stayed at the Ronald McDonald House basically throughout the entire stay of the hospital for my son. Occasionally went back and forth to my parents' house to do laundry or just to get some sleep because I personally felt more comfortable if I needed to go back and get sleep at my parents' house compared to the Ronald McDonald House. That's just me. Not that the Ronald McDonald House, it wasn't safe because it was very safe. I just could get better rest at my parents' house.
Yeah.
So I was discharged that Sunday. So at the Duke in the NICU, there is a little couch that you are able to sleep on, and we were allowed to sleep there in that room with him. So there were definitely I would say at least 90% of the time, myself or my husband was in the room with Caleb. So after we were discharged, we were going back and forth, we were staying with him, and it was May the 4th, 4 days old, and he had his first open heart surgery. And I remember the night before his surgery, I didn't sleep at all. I just stayed in his room and I held him and I prayed over him and I sang to him and I just was speaking the word of God over him to like over him.
Have they given you guys any indication of what his chances were after that first surgery? Like, did they expect him to come through it? Like, did they expect it to go well? Like, what did they tell you going into that?
The expectancy after the first surgery was 70 to 80%
Okay. Make it out of the first surgery. Yeah.
with the first surgery. And then the second surgery, I think, was like 60 to 70%. So basically, it's like a 70% survival rate
Yeah.
for the first year. The first year of life is the most critical for them because they have two open heart surgeries in the first year. The first surgery is between 2 and 5 days old, and then the second surgery is between 4 and 6 months. So the one thing I do remember is like 1 out of 100 babies are born with a congenital heart defect, and 1 out of every 5,000 babies are born with HLHS. So those are like the two things that I remember out of all the different statistics. Um, some kiddos need more extensive care, but after his first surgery, we were out of the hospital within 3 weeks. And we were told that most of the time, the first surgery that you can expect to be in the hospital for 4 to 8 or 10 weeks.
Wow.
So the fact that we were able to go home 3 weeks after his first surgery was a huge, huge relief and blessing. And we were just so ready to go home and be home and just have some sort of normalcy
Yeah.
with a baby. Because, there are tons of people, millions of people who have babies and they can go home a day or two
Right.
afterwards and just live
Right.
their life. But we've got to live our first basically month in the hospital with our newborn and learning how to care for him, basically,
Yeah.
and listening to doctors tell us this and that, and physical therapy showing us how to have him moving, like, and speech therapy and OT, and just that was a lot.
And it's just so much more than because I feel like adjusting to becoming a parent in the first place, like adjusting to the fact that your body just went through this huge transformation and you just gave birth and you're postpartum and you're trying to figure out, how to take care of your baby.
Mhm.
But then it's like you had to basically take a whole college course in addition to that and to learn how to take care of him specifically with his condition and post-op and how to take care of him because of his surgery and all these things like that's just so much.
Yes, it was a lot. It was a lot to take in, and I know that once we got home, my husband started noticing that I was acting differently, and I never I mean, I've heard of postpartum depression, but I never, like, really looked into it, but I looked it up, and I was like, "Yeah, this is exactly what I'm going through," and I told my husband, I was like, "Look, I'm going through postpartum depression myself and having to also learn how to take care of our child," and there were so many doctor's appointments within, gosh, his first 6 months of life, really. Um, it was a lot, and I wasn't able to ever breastfeed him because just he came home with an NG tube, so he was being NG tube fed, but we were also having to work on bottle feeding, and we were trying to breastfeed, but at the time, Duke was more focused on him gaining weight, and they told me that my breast milk did not have the calories that he needed. And so we were having to fortify breast milk and doing formula. And just looking back, I'm very happy to be in a way over that and past all that
Yeah.
and enjoying where we are with him now. But yeah, it was definitely a roller coaster of a year, first year with our first baby. So for a while, I was a part of a Facebook group there's an HLHS Facebook group where parents can come and ask questions and kind of tell their story. And at one point, I just had to get out of it. It got hard having to listen and hear the stories that I just was like, I can't do that right now.
Yeah.
You know, just that part of the season that it just got hard. Even though we're very blessed to be where we are with our first one, with Caleb and how far he's made it. But there are lots of other HLHS babies that just don't make it the first year, and it's really sad.
Mm.
But we're thankful for the technology that is around and the surgeons that are able to work on these little tiny hearts, and it's just amazing what they can do.
So how did his second surgery go then?
So we came home right before Memorial Weekend in May, and up until July 4th, so 4th of July, it was doing really good. We were doing really good with the feeds. We were seeing all the doctors we needed to see, pediatricians, cardiology, speech therapy, physical therapy, OT, going back and forth between all of those different doctors.
Wow.
I think it was right after July 4th. My parents and all of my family actually came down to the beach and spent the entire weekend with us. And I think it was that week after everybody left that Caleb's oxygen levels were dropping. So we were, when we brought Caleb home, we had an O2 sensor. It's like a little, you can stick it on their toes at night, and we always had to have it on him at night. We were allowed to put it on him throughout the day if we wanted to, but we were always so busy that we never did. And it would start beeping if his oxygen would drop below 75. So it was at night that it started dropping. And then we always had somebody that we could call and ask questions and like, hey, his oxygen levels are this or that. And we called them and let them know that his oxygens were low. And they basically told us to come in. So we were at Duke in July for an entire week. And in that time, he had a heart catheter. And after his heart catheter, he ended up on oxygen. So we came home after that Duke visit on oxygen. And even before we brought Caleb home in May, we had to have oxygen tanks on hand at our house. So we already had a bunch of oxygen tanks at our house, and we just had to switch him over once the oxygen tank ran out. So we came home in July after the catheter. He was on oxygen, and about middle of August is when his oxygen started dipping again, even though he was already on oxygen. We were not allowed to adjust it unless we'd already gone to Duke and they were able to like mess around with how much he would need. So middle of August, we ended up back at Duke, and it was just me for a couple of days because my husband had to work. So that's not we're so thankful for my husband's job because he was been able to take off. He was
A
able
lot of
to take
time.
on and off as much as he needed to during that time with Caleb because there was just so much going on. But yeah, we ended up back at Duke. My Caleb was 3.5 months old at that time, and normally the second surgery is between 4 and 6 months. But Dr. Steed and the surgeons at Duke were all very happy with Caleb's weight progress, that they all agreed that it was okay for him to go ahead and have a second open heart surgery. So he got his second open heart surgery, which is called the Glenn, at 3.5 months old. And that was August 17th. I remember most of these dates of when I was born, surgeries, and when we were just can remember those. And then after his surgery, that surgery was a lot harder of a recovery. So they call it the Glenn headache. They don't know why, but babies after having the Glenn surgery, they have like this massive headache, and it's like just so much pressure because they go in and they fix the heart to where it's able to get the blood oxygen that it needs a little bit more. So it's just like reconfiguring the heart. So it's just like all a little different, and they just get this massive headache. So I remember, I think it was a day or two after his surgery, I wanted to hold my baby, but looking back now, I probably shouldn't have because he was just, you could tell he was in a lot of pain.
Yeah.
But I also wanted to be, that mother and give him the comfort that he needed. And he was hooked up to so many cords. I held him and you could just tell he was in pain. Like he just was like puffy, and yeah, it was just like really heartbreaking seeing him going through that again. But I know at one point that during the recovery, so they have an art line in his neck and it got swollen. It was swollen, so he wasn't able to move his neck. So they had to take that out and redo it at one point. And yeah, there's just a lot with that second one. But I think we were able to come home a week and a half after that surgery, and he was not on oxygen. So we were very,
Oh, wow.
very thankful and pleased that he was not able to, he was able to come home off oxygen because for an entire month, we were having to cart around an oxygen tank throughout the house and to any of his appointments. And we basically did not go anywhere for an entire month unless it was to a doctor's appointment because
Yeah.
carting his NG tube and his oxygen tank, and I was pumping at the time, so all of my pump stuff, it was just like,
Oh, yeah.
it was a
It's like
mess.
a whole thing.
Such a
It's like
mess.
a caravan of things just for, oh,
Basically, yes.
man.
It was a lot, but, yeah, so he got his second surgery at 3.5 months old, and then, um, he hasn't had his third surgery. Right now, he is 2.5. He will be 3 April 30th. We have started the talks a little bit with his current cardiologist here at ECU. Not that it would be done at ECU, it'd still be done at Duke,
Yeah.
but we see a cardiologist here at ECU. We've started talking about his third surgery, normally between the ages of 3 and 5. So I'm really praying that we can have one more normal summer. And especially since I have a newborn, I would rather not be back in the hospital
Right.
dealing with that surgery with the baby at home. So I'm praying that we have one more summer until 2026, and that's hopefully maybe we can make it till then for his first surgery. But yeah,
Oof.
in a nutshell, I guess that was my first birth.
Wow. That
Just a
is a
lot.
lot. That's a lot. Do you feel like during that time going through all of that, do you feel like that strengthened your faith or do you feel like it put like, a weakness or a pressure on your faith?
I definitely think there were times that I know that when we found out that he had HLHS, I questioned God a lot. Like, why us? Why my baby? Why? There's a lot of like, just why. But I was constantly reminded that God sees the bigger picture and he knows our baby's plans and future. And I would definitely say a lot of family kind of came closer to God during this time for sure. I can see it now, definitely, like how I wouldn't say necessarily Caleb's story impacted them, but we hear from so many family members and friends how much they love seeing Caleb's story and like just seeing how he's growing and progressing, like on Facebook. Um, so I would definitely say yes, that there was lots of ups and downs between our relationship with the Lord during the time of Caleb, but I definitely would say it did strengthen our relationship with the Lord during that time and still has. I mean, we would not have been able to make it 3 weeks in the hospital eating hospital food. Um, it's not terrible, but it's not the best. Thankfully, with my family being close and lots of friends in that area, they provided meals for us while we were in the hospital and just constantly were praying for us and telling us that they were thinking about us. And it was a great community during that time. And we still have some of that community. It's just not as big as it used to be, if that makes any
Yeah.
sense.
Well, good. I'm glad that it was an experience that led to a stronger relationship.
Hmm.
So, I imagine after all of that, you guys needed to breathe a little bit before
Yes.
before getting pregnant again.
Yes.
So what prompted you guys to get pregnant with your second?
Well, I will say Drew was ready to have a second a lot sooner than I was. It took a little bit more time for me only because I just wanted to enjoy and soak up the moments that we had with Caleb. I just wanted an entire year of like not running around between so many doctors and just a sense of normalcy with Caleb. So Caleb was born in 2022. 2023, it was all a lot slower, a lot calmer than his first year. And we started talking about having another one. We knew we wanted 2 kids. We've always known that we wanted 2. So 2023, My husband and I celebrated our 5-year anniversary in October, and we went on a cruise, and we knew after the cruise that we were gonna start trying for our second. So, we started trying for our second, and I was thinking, "Okay, I will get pregnant within a month."
Right, like
And
the
because
first
I
time.
got yeah, the first time I got pregnant within a month. Um, that did not happen. So, I started October, and I think I took a pregnancy test, like, every month just because I was like, I'm just gonna take one." I was never late. So with Caleb, I found out literally I was, like, 4 weeks when I found out I was pregnant with him. I was, like, a day or 2 late on my period with him. But with our second, I don't remember if I was late. I took a pregnancy test in February of 2024. It was Valentine's Day. I wasn't late, but I was gonna be starting soon, and it was positive. And I was like, "Oh my gosh."
Hmm.
I was literally shaking. I was like, "Oh my gosh, Drew, it's positive. It's positive." And I was like and he was like, "Yeah, it's positive." I was like, "Are you not, like, nervous like I am?" Like, "Oh my gosh, it's actually positive this time." So, yeah, we started trying in October 2023 and found out I was pregnant February of 2024. So it just took a little bit longer the second time, and I'm not sure exactly why, but that's perfectly fine. Everything was in God's timing, and I was like, "Okay, if we start trying now, we'll have a baby this time or around this time," and yeah, so,
Yay. Did you have another smooth pregnancy then? Like in terms of your health? Like was everything good again?
yeah, everything was really great, with myself. The first trimester, I had waves of nausea. It was never like, "Oh, morning sickness or night sickness." It just came in waves throughout the day. I never threw up, but there were definitely moments that I was just like, "Okay, I just can't eat anything. I need to drink some water." I remember specifically one time I had warmed up some chicken nuggets for myself to eat, and it was fine, but then when my son wanted chicken nuggets, I warmed them up again for him or warmed some up for him, and just something about the smell the second time, I was like, I have to go lay down. I think I might throw up. Like, I don't know why, but I just ate these, but suddenly warming them up for my toddler, I'm, like, feeling so sick. I have no idea why. And then
That's pregnancy.
yeah, it's so weird. In the first trimester, I never knew what I wanted to eat.
Mhm.
I don't for a little while, did not want, like, chicken. I didn't want pork. It was a very weird first trimester. I think I probably ordered out more than anything of finding anything like, I could never find anything I wanted to eat in my house.
Yeah.
Like, never. I don't know why. It's and my husband was like, "I really hope that when you get to your second trimester that you can eat normal again." And I'm like, "Yeah, me too, because this is getting expensive."
Yes, yes it
Trying to
is.
figure out what you wanna eat.
I'm all too
So
familiar with that. Yep, it's a very pricey time in the pregnancy for sure.
it really is. So, got to the second trimester. Thankfully, I was able to kinda eat a little normal again. It took a little while for me to, like, want chicken
Yeah.
again, but I was definitely a lot smoother. My blood pressure was all good. I was healthy, baby was healthy. At that point, I know we took a class with you, and I can't remember what month it was.
It was the end of April.
Okay. End of April, I guess I was in my second
I think
trimester,
you had
the
just started
beginning.
your second. Yeah.
Yeah, just started my second trimester, and then going through your class was wonderful. All of it was such great information. And that was kinda nice with taking your class is learning new things. Like, with my first, I didn't really have options as far as, like, delivery goes or, like, care providers. So, we started looking into the possibility of doing a home birth with our second. Plus, my sister had had a home birth December of 2023, and everything went fairly well with her home birth, other than the fact that her husband had to catch the baby.
Hers went abnormally fast for a first baby.
Yes, it was yes, like, to this day, I'm still jealous of how fast that went,
I'm sure a
but
lot
it's
of people
okay.
are.
It's okay. That's her story, and that's how God wanted it to be for her, so that's perfectly fine. But yeah, so we started looking into home birth, and we even started looking at birthing centers. Unfortunately, the closest birthing center for us is, like, an hour and a half away, and that is I think in Cary, and that's the most recent one that they opened back up, I think.
Yeah, open back up. Yeah.
Yeah, that was the closest birth center for us. Financially wise, it just made more sense for us to go to the hospital with our insurance wise. It just made more sense for us to go to the hospital. So I agreed that we would do a hospital birth. My husband was never on board with doing a home birth. Maybe because of hearing my sister's home birth story and how he did not want to have to catch the baby. That's one thing he did not want to have to do was catch the baby. So I was like, "All right, fine. We'll do a hospital birth, but let's compromise and let's look into getting a doula." So we started interviewing a couple doulas, and we found a doula in Raleigh. Sadly, there's not very many doulas here in Greenville, North Carolina. The closest one that we could find was in Jacksonville. Anyways, we found a doula in Raleigh, and she gave us lots of resources that we would need. I could text her anytime if I had questions.
So you were getting a doula. So were you planning to go the like unmedicated route at the hospital? Is that what your plan was?
Yes, so we got a doula to kinda advocate for us, since my husband wasn't able to be a part of the labor and delivery experience with our first, I mean, all of it was done in the hospital, and I knew with the second one, I wanted to labor at home as long as possible. Because
Yeah.
we both have trauma from the hospital and the labor and delivery experience that we knew we wanted a doula that could help advocate for us, and, so my husband could focus more so on me, and help me through the labor and delivery process. Of course, the doula would be there to step in to help, you know, relieve him or just be there. So that's one of the reasons why we decided to get a doula and just to be a second pair of hands. So we didn't know the gender of baby until the anatomy scan, and of course, at the anatomy scan, we were really praying that this baby would have a healthy heart.
Right.
There is like a 1 to 5% chance of a second baby or the third baby having HLHS again,
Yeah.
or even a critical heart condition. So we were praying this baby would be healthy and all would be well. And I remember at the anatomy scan, I thought we were having a boy, and I was just like, "We're gonna have another boy. It's just what's gonna happen." Because apparently on my side of the family, all we seem to produce are boys. And then finding out that it was a girl, I was like, "Oh my gosh, it's a girl. I only know about trucks and dirt and just, like, all things boys." I was like, "Oh, we have a girl." We were very excited to learn that we were having a girl, but we were even more ecstatic knowing that this baby had all 4 chambers of the heart, and just looking at the anatomy, and immediately when I saw the heart, I was like, I could just see the difference between looking at Caleb's heart and seeing her heart. I just was like I cried. We both cried, and it was just such a relief knowing how much that we would not have to go through the same things again. It was
Yeah.
just truly the biggest blessing, and just so, so happy for that.
So, did you get to go into labor this time?
I did,
Oh,
and it's
good.
definitely a story. It is like the complete opposite of my first story or my first baby. So I'll start with at the OBGYN. I was seeing multiple different midwives, and of course, you don't get to pick your midwife. You just kind of end up with whatever midwife is on call that night or during the day or whatever. So I met this midwife actually, I think I was 38 weeks at the time, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, I really like this midwife, and I'm gonna pray that this will be the midwife that I have during the time that I go into labor and I give birth." And I was actually listening to one of your podcasts, and I remember the mom saying that she was praying for a labor and delivery in less than 12 hours, and prayed that she would have the doctor or midwife that she liked. So I was like, you know what? I'm gonna take that, and I'm going to pray that I will have a baby in labor and delivery in 12 hours or less, and that I will have the midwife that I really, really like and click with. So I just continue to pray that over myself and everything. So my due date for baby girl was October 20th. And my anniversary is October 24th. So I was like, all right, I know I've heard that normally the second one comes early. However, we got to October 20th. She still hadn't arrived. At this time, I was doing the raspberry tea. I was curb walking. I was doing the mile circuit. I was doing literally everything that I had read, been told to do, except for the midwife's brew. I was like, that will be my last resort, like
Right.
absolute last resort.
As it
So
should
I did
be.
not do that. Yeah. So my anniversary came around. Baby was still not here because I was like, she's going to come on our anniversary because it's a girl and she's going to have to be here on a very important day. Still didn't come. Um, I made it to 41 weeks and I was like, and it was Sunday. I was like, all right, she has to come. Like, she's got to come. Like, I'm doing everything possible to get her here. Like, come on. Like, at this point, it's not that I wasn't enjoying my pregnancy, but, you get to a point where you're just so uncomfortable. And I was like, to that point, I was like, all right, I'm so uncomfortable. I can't sleep very well at night anymore. I was just like, you have to come soon. Please come soon. So it was 41 and 2. I woke up and it was a normal day. I took my toddler to the park. We got Chick-fil-A for lunch. He took a nap and then we made cookies and just, made it a fun day. And then I cooked dinner that night. And then after dinner, we went for a walk. And I think it was like 7 o'clock. And our neighbor beside us, she's actually currently pregnant, and she was like, "Girl, you're still pregnant?" I was like, "Yes." Like, "Yes. I'm 41 in 2 days," and, like, we talked and joked about, like, when she would come and all this stuff, and, we got back from our walk. It was like a 30-minute walk. Got back from our walk, and I texted my sister. I was like, "My back is a little, like, sore." Like, I thought it was, like, Braxton Hicks because 'cause I'd been having Braxton Hicks a lot. Gosh, I don't even know when I had my first Braxton Hicks. It was probably, like, 32 weeks or, like, something like that. So I'd been having them for a while. So Erin was like my sister Erin, she was like, "Why don't you just take a bath?" And I was like, "Yeah, I guess I'll just take a bath." And took a bath and I was in the bathtub for like soaking for like 30 minutes and in that time I was still like 3 different times my back was a little uncomfortable, but nothing like it was just normal. Like, okay, it's just a little back pain. Like I'm okay. So got out of the bath. My husband was putting Caleb down to bed. I decided to check my hospital bag and baby girl's hospital bag, just making sure like, we had everything that we needed, mostly everything that we needed. And just kinda doing little things throughout the house and wasn't quite feeling a whole lot of anything. Just a little uncomfortable. So I did call my mom, I think it was like 9:30. I was like, "Hey, just letting you know, like, there's a possibility that this could be labor, but I'm not sure because I don't remember what labor was like with my first because I was on so many different things. Like, I don't remember the pain. Oh, okay, I remember the pain only because the epidural came in.
Right.
That pain I remember.
But you were also on Pitocin.
Exactly, that too. So, I was remembering all the things that the midwife had told me to, like, look for, like, contractions at least a minute long for, like, an entire hour, and that's when you
Mhm.
know that you needed to go to the hospital. I was like, "Yeah, okay, cool." So, I just called my mom and I told her, I was like, "Hey, there's a possibility this could be labor, but I'm not sure. If it is, it could take a while." And then I think it was, like, 10 o'clock. I texted my doula like, "Hey, I'm going to go to bed, just letting you know that I'm kind of uncomfortable if I can't sleep, like, over the next hour, or if I can't get comfortable for, like, the next hour, I will call you or text you or let you know." And she was like, "Okay, cool. Sounds great," because she needs, like, an hour and a half to 2 hours to, like, get out the door. I think it was, like, 10 o'clock. I laid down, and, like, for the next hour, I was contracting in bed, and I was getting uncomfortable, and I would time them with a little timer on my phone with an app, and they were anywhere between, like, 30 to 45 seconds long, and about 6 to, like, 8 minutes apart. So, tracked that for about an hour. 11:30, I called my mom. I was like, "Hey, I've been having contractions. They're not going away. Can you start heading this way?" And she lives 2 hours from us. So, she got in the car and started heading this way. And then I called my doula. I think it was, like, 11:45 at that time. It's like, "Hey, I'm having contractions, like, they're such and such amount for" at this time, I think they were maybe, like, 5 to 7 minutes apart. And I woke my husband up after I got off the phone with the doula. So, like, for the next hour, well, 45 minutes to an hour, did not have my phone on me. I was just kind of, like, going throughout the house and making sure things were, like, in order and grabbing last minute things, like glasses, because I wear contacts, like glasses and, like, all the bathroom stuff that I would need for the hospital. And my husband was doing the same thing. And during that 45 minutes to an hour, I would have to, like, stop and just, like, breathe and, like, just move. It was never to the point where I just, like, couldn't talk.
Mhm.
I was able to talk. I just felt like, there's, like, a bunch of pressure in my back. I don't think I remember much at all in my belly. It was mostly all in my back. And standing up was, like, the most comfortable for me. I couldn't lay down. I didn't even try using the birthing ball. I didn't even try getting in the shower. I just was, like, having to walk around and standing up. So, at one point, I know I had to go to the bathroom. I was like, "I gotta pee." Like, I just feel like I have to pee. So I went and sat on the toilet, and Drew was like, "We need to call the doula and ask her, like, what we should do."
Was
Whether
she
we
on
should
her way at that point?
No, she was not on her way at all.
And you said
She
she
was
lived
still at
far
home.
from you?
Yeah, she was an hour and a half away. When I first called her at 11:30, 11:45, she was like, "Okay, well, just call me whenever you want me to head that way." And I was like, "Okay, we'll call you." Because I was like, I don't want her to come, like, super, super early. I know she's here for a reason. Yeah, anyways, so, I think it was, like, 12:45, 12:30, 12:45. Called the doula. We told her, like, "Hey, contractions are 4 to 5 minutes apart." And she was like, "Okay, call me and let me know when you want me to come, like, I'm here." So and we're like, "Okay." So, I was on the bathroom, and I had to turn around to get comfortable, and I was on the toilet backwards, and Drew was like, "We need to call the hospital," or, "We need to call the OBGYN and just, like, let them know that you're in labor," kinda thing. So we call them. Of course, you get, like, an operator, then they will say, "We'll have the midwife on call you back." So, during that time while we were waiting around, Drew was like, "We need to start getting things to the car." I was like, "Okay." And I was like, "Well, we can't leave because my mom has to get here for Caleb. Like, we can't leave Caleb here by himself." So, I was like, "We can always just pack him up and bring him to the hospital with us." I'm like, "I'm not packing my toddler up to go to the hospital and give birth." And I was like, "No, we can't do that." So I called my mom, and that was around 12:45, 1 o'clock, I think, and she was, like, an hour to 45 minutes away. And we're like, "Okay." So, got off the phone with her, and then the midwife called, and that was about 1:15 she finally called, and I was on the toilet, and she was like, "Hey, how's everything going?" I was like, "Well, I know I'm in labor," and within talking to her for, like, 5 minutes, I had, like, 3 contractions back to back, and she was like, "Okay, you are clearly in labor, and you need to come to the hospital." And I was like, "Okay." And she was like, "Do you think you can make it to the hospital?" And I was like, "Yeah, I think we can make it."
Like, why wouldn't I be able
So,
to
I
make it?
got off the toilet. Yeah, I was like, "What? I can make it. Yeah, we can make it." And I was like, "But I can't leave yet because my mom's not here. Like, I can't leave." Like, I was in this, like, conundrum of, like, leaving the hospital, but also waiting for my mom to get there so that we can have somebody watch Caleb. And the midwife was like, "Do you have a neighbor close by that can just come to the house and watch your son or be there with your son?" I was like, "Yeah, I guess we do, but I don't know who's gonna, like, answer their phone at this time of the hour, but, like, we can if we need to." So, anyways, I got off the toilet and I started walking to the sink. Drew was running around trying to get things to the car, and, as soon as I stood up, I was like, I need to push. Like, I feel this urge to push. Like, I have to push. So, and of course, during that time, I was having a traction, and the only comfort that I could really find was for Drew to, like, squeeze my hips together. So he wasn't able to get very far, like getting things to the car or just, like, running around. So every time I would have a contraction, I would be like, I would, like, push my hips together, and there's just, like, so much pressure in my back and my hips and everything, so it basically took 3 pushes and baby girl arrived
Wait, while
in my
you're
bathroom.
I did not know about this in your story. I totally thought we were still going to the hospital.
Yeah, so we were on the phone with the midwife, and as soon as I told her I needed to push, she was like, "You need to call 911." And when she said that, my husband was actually on the phone with my mom trying to figure out how close she was so we could get out the door and go to the hospital. And he literally hung up on my mom. My mom was freaking out at the time, like, "What the heck is going on?" And he calls 911, and in this time, I'm having contractions, I'm having the urge to push, and he's on the phone being coached by the 911 operator on how to catch the baby,
Your poor
and I'm on the
husband.
phone with the midwife. I'm on the phone with the midwife and, like, not really talking much, just being like, "Okay, I can totally do this," like, basically coaching myself. I'm like, "Okay, I can totally do this," like, plenty of people have babies all the time, like, my body was meant to do this. I am meant to do this, and this is how it's gonna happen, and it's just gonna happen here in my bathroom. So and I know at one point I asked my midwife, I was like, "Do you have kids?" And she was like, "Yes, I have a son." I was like, "Okay, so you know the pain that I'm going through," because it was just so much. It was just, like, a lot, and it happened so fast. It was literally 3 pushes, and baby girl arrived in Drew's arms in the bathroom. Yes,
Oh,
we had a unplanned home birth, basically.
unplanned, unassisted home birth.
Home birth, yes, and yeah, baby girl arrived. Um, it was a lot to take in. I was like, "Oh my gosh, I just had a baby in my bathroom." And I know during the pushing, I was making loud noises, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, my toddler is going to wake up, and he's gonna come into our bathroom, and he's gonna see all this going on." And I'm like, thankfully, my toddler slept through all of it. He slept through
Nice.
everything. The dogs barking in the backyard, going berserk, the EMS arriving and making a whole bunch of noise. They arrived 10 minutes after, Nyla was born, and, yeah, they were like, "Oh my gosh, we have not been to a home birth like this." Like, I think one of the EMS girls, she was like, "I've been in EMS for, like, 2 years, and I've never seen this." I'm like, "Well, I'm glad I can be your first."
But I'm assuming because she came so fast and because, I don't know, your demeanor, everything was good. Like she came out and she was fine and she was healthy and it was great.
Mhm. Yep, she was healthy, she was great. They EMS came and clamped the cord. I think at that time, the cord was almost white. I was planning on doing a delayed cord clamping in the hospital, so it kinda just worked out. They did clamp the cord, and they cut it, and I got on the EMS stretcher, and we got carted out, and, I ended up delivering my placenta in the ambulance in my driveway. Um, while I was in the while I was in the ambulance, my mom arrived, and I think she, like, darted in the house to find out, like, make sure everything was going alright, and Drew apparently was running around in the house like a chicken with his head cut off, trying to get, like, clean up the mess, get everything into the car, and just, like, he was on a high, basically, because of everything that happened. Oh, I remember at one point during the time that I was pushing, I, like, looked back and looked at him, and he was, like, shaking because he was like, "I did not wanna have a baby at home for a reason," like, I was like, "You got to eat your words, you know? God had this already planned out, and you ended up delivering our baby anyways, so."
Right. I know. He's the one who's like, I don't want a home birth because I don't want to have to deliver my baby. And then
Exactly.
see, we
Exactly,
make
and
our
those are
plans and God
I
laughs.
know, it's so funny, and I know that's what my sister's husband had said originally why he didn't want a home birth because he didn't wanna have to catch the baby, and then he had to catch the baby for their birth, and then my husband's saying the same thing, "I don't wanna have to catch a baby," and I was like, "You're gonna eat those words," and you ended up eating those words anyway. I think it's just God has a sense of humor, let's just say that.
Yeah.
So, yep, baby girl arrived at 1:36, October 30th, the day before Halloween. I did not really care to have a Halloween baby, but she came when she was meant to come, and that is okay, and everything was healthy and well. We made it to the hospital. As soon as we got to the hospital, I was ready to go home. I was like, "I don't want to be here. I don't wanna be here." So we ended up staying in the hospital for 24 hours and just staying there. I was just like, "If we had a third, it would definitely be a home birth because I am not coming back to the hospital. There's just no way."
You're kind of like, what's the point? I already did the thing.
I
So,
know. Exactly. So now on, Nyla's birth certificate, it says under, like, the delivery part, normally it has, like, the doctor, it has Drew's name instead of the doctor's name.
perfect.
Yeah, so it was great. Definitely very 2 different birth stories.
Oh,
One
yeah.
that was I had no say in whatsoever, and the second one, I was like, "I want a say in as much as possible
Yeah.
and how it not necessarily how it's gonna turn out, but just, like, leading up to how it can turn out." So,
Yeah.
yep.
So, did you end up getting to breastfeed Nyla at all?
So, yes, we did breastfeed. I think, like, the first 6 weeks, I was mainly focused on her feeding 'cause, oh, boy, she has a shallow latch. She did have a tongue and lip tie. We got those both released, and unfortunately, it did not help. So, I was still in a lot of pain, and after every single feeding she was feeding about 45 minutes to an hour.
Mm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I just cannot sit that long and just do that, and I was having to pump after almost every single nursing session, and it was just becoming so exhausting. So I will say we got to breastfeed for about 6 to 7 weeks, and then after that, we just ended up switching to bottle. So she's on bottle, I still pump now. I still pump 8 to 7 times a day, so she's still getting what she needs. So yeah, that was our little nursing journey. It wasn't very long, but that's okay. I've come to just accept that and be okay with that. I mean, happy baby is a fed baby. So, and she's thriving. She's doing really well. So, yep.
Good. I'm glad she's doing so well.
Mhm. Me too.
Do you feel like your husband's recovered from the emotional birth? I'm like, at this
It's
point,
funny.
which one does he think was more traumatic, the induction at the hospital or having to catch his baby at home?
I don't know. I know there are definitely things he remembers from my induction. He swears he remembers hearing a popping noise when I gave birth to Caleb, and I'm like, "I don't know what popping noise you're talking about," but yeah. And then with Nyla, of course, he ended up having to catch her, so I think he talks about catching the baby now, and he feels like it's exciting to talk about. Like, he's like, "I caught my baby, like, this is exciting, and I actually enjoy talking about the fact that I caught my baby." And I'm like, "Yeah, see, it wasn't so bad, like, you could totally do it, like, you did it, and it wasn't so bad." So, I don't know, I think probably Caleb's is still, like, traumatic compared to Nyla's, but
Well, good.
yeah.
Good that he's gotten past the the shock of catching his
Yeah.
baby and can see it in a good way now.
I guess it took about 24 hours for him to kinda get, like, wind down from realizing that he caught his baby, but now it's definitely more of, like, "Yay, excited, I caught my baby," kinda thing, so, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I know you said this postpartum has been emotional. Do you feel like you had postpartum depression again, like you did with Caleb, or was it different somehow?
Um, I think I think because I've been able to focus a little bit more on myself with this postpartum, where with Caleb, I wasn't really to focus on myself. I will say the first week with Nyla, it was really hard to sleep. Um, I had a really awful head cold while I gave birth to Nyla,
Mm,
as well as when I got home. We ended up going to urgent care for myself and for Caleb because Caleb had, I think, he had a cold or a sinus infection that had been going on for a while. So sleep was really hard for first week just because I was feeling sick and I was also trying to keep up with nursing. And I remember sitting in urgent care and I just felt like my body was melting because I was just so tired.
yeah.
Just like I could have like laid on the table and just took a nap if I had to. Plus, and then I guess 2 weeks after Nyla was born, Drew's father passed away unexpectedly to a heart attack. So, it was dealing with the newly postpartum and a newborn and a toddler, and then my husband went to Charleston, South Carolina for a day and a half and took Caleb with him. And then during that time, Caleb ended up getting a stomach bug while he was in Charleston, and I was here back home with Nyla. Thankfully, my sister and her little boy were able to come stay. I think just there was just a lot going on, and it was just very draining, tiring and draining. And I was really concerned about the feeding for Nyla because in the beginning with Caleb, we were all focused on a lot of things with him. And with Nyla, I just wanted to make sure that she was getting what she needed because she was born at 8 pounds, 5 ounces. And we have a picture of it to prove it. However, when we left the hospital, somebody put in the chart that she was born at 7 pounds, 3 ounces.
Oh, that's weird.
Yeah, so we were getting conflicted weights between going. I was also seeing lactation to kind of help improve with nursing. So like we could never figure out what was her actual weight. But I mean, we have a picture of her at 8 pounds, 5 ounces. So, but when we left the hospital, she was 7 pounds, 11 ounces. So according to the hospital, she was already gaining weight, but
There's
because
no
of the
way.
chart.
Yeah.
But I was like, there's no way she's gaining weight. Like, no, like, there's just no way.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of conflicting on her weight. And I know at one of her pediatrician's appointments, they talked about putting her on formula. And I was like, oh, I did not want to go that route only because of, I think it was more so because we just had no say so in how Caleb was really getting fed with our first one. And I was like, I want a say so in how Nyla will be cared for and
Yeah.
what nutrition she's getting. Not that there's anything wrong with formula. It's just I just really wanted to do breast milk at all possible. So
Yeah.
just between feeding a sudden death and traveling and her
Sickness.
needing a tongue and lip tie released is just it
That's a
was a lot,
lot.
and having the stress and anxiety and all that stuff. So, but I think it's starting to get a little bit better.
Well, I'm glad it's starting to get better and
Yes.
starting to like come out of all that. And you had like all the holidays in there of Thanksgiving and Christmas and all. I mean, that is a lot, a lot, a
Yes.
lot.
Traveled to my parents for Thanksgiving. I mean, it was only 2 hours, but
Well, still, anytime you have to pack up a toddler and a newborn, it's a big deal. So,
yeah.
especially that fresh postpartum.
And then pack things for yourself.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So, I know we've touched on it, throughout your stories, but did you want to speak to any more about anything else you feel like God taught you through these experiences or that God spoke to you through these experiences?
I will say that, going back to my first pregnancy, I was a very controlling and, like, a planner, and with Caleb's story, I had to let go a lot of that and just let God take control of
Yeah.
ultimately his entire plan. Just learning to let go and let God take control of your life is probably the biggest takeaway from all of this. And that is very hard for me because I'm kind of a type A personality. So I
Yeah.
like to have control and say so or how this is going to go and how I'd like for it to go. And then ultimately, it's not up to me, it's up to God. And learning to let go of that is very challenging. But I think because of that, it's made me a little bit more laid back as far as like raising kids goes because kids are kids. They have their own agenda sometimes, and you can try and reason with them and you can try and be like this option or this option. And they're like, well, what about this option? And I'm like, that wasn't even an option, but okay. So just learning to let go and let God take control is probably the biggest takeaway from all of it. With Caleb's story, with Nyla's story. We tried to make it to the hospital with Nyla. It just didn't happen. It didn't happen. And I'm honestly okay with that. I'm glad that we did not have it at the hospital, that it was an unexpected home birth. And it all worked out how it needed to happen. And yeah, for that, I am very thankful and grateful. Even though Drew did not want to have a home birth and did not want to catch a baby, he still did an amazing job and still continues to do an amazing job as a father. So, yeah.
That's great. See, and that's why we talk about these things in the class that you took. It's funny because I have somebody else who took my class shortly after you who had the exact opposite experience of you. You know, a lot of people who are planning like natural unmedicated births will take like a
Mhm.
natural unmedicated birth class, or will take a home birth class specifically if they're planning a home birth and stuff, which is great and wonderful. Or people who are planning, you know, a medicated hospital birth will take a hospital birth class who are planning on the epidural and all those things. And that's great too. But the reason why in my class I teach all scenarios is
Mhm.
because we don't know how our births are going to unfold. And I don't ever want
Yeah.
somebody to feel unprepared in such a way that they didn't know what to expect in that situation. Because if I had just taught you, this is how it's going to be at the hospital, this is how like a hospital birth goes, and then, you know, you have your home birth, it could be a lot more freaky um, and scary, especially for, you know, your husband too, had you not known what to expect in like a natural physiological birth at home. Whereas
Mhm.
I have another girl recently who was planning a home birth and everything, and
Mhm.
she ended up transferring to the hospital and having a hospital birth. And she said she was so thankful that in our
Mhm.
class, we also talked about hospital birth and what to expect at the hospital and
Mhm.
everything like that, because then she was prepared for that scenario and it wasn't as, you know, scary to her because she had learned about it ahead of time. And so that's part of why I don't teach like a one specific, this is how we're going to, you know, birth class, because you never know how it will unfold. And so while we have our plans, which is great, and we have our goals and desires and all those things, we need to, I always want to make sure everybody knows what's possible so that should that happen to you, it's not like the first time you are hearing about it. It's like, okay, yes, we talked about this in class. That's right.
Mhm. I remember when I was in the dilation station position, I remember I remember Kayla talking about how this is, like, one position that seems to get things moving along, and maybe it doesn't work for everybody, but I was like, "I think that's probably what got labor, like, really going from 30 minutes, like, 5 minutes to 3 minutes to, like, oh, suddenly you're having a baby kinda thing because it just
Oh,
happened
yeah.
so fast. Like, I was on the phone with the midwife for 20 minutes, and then at 20 minutes, I had a baby.
Yeah, that backwards toilet position is,
Yes.
it's really good. Well, and also, especially at home, it's harder at the hospital because a lot of times the hospital bathrooms or toilets do not have backs on them. It's just like that big
Mhm.
pipe coming
Yep.
out of the wall. Whereas at a home or sometimes a birth center toilet, you know, it has like the nice commode, everything on the back, and you can like stick a pillow over it and like lean on it and like totally relax on it. And that
Mhm.
is, it's a really, really good laboring position for sure.
Yes, it is. I'll probably recommend that to any friends, be like, "Yep, go get on the toilet."
Before you go to the hospital, if you're planning a hospital, get on that toilet.
Yep. And my doula didn't even make it to the birth.
Right. I was going to say, it doesn't sound like she was there for any of that. Poor
She did
girl.
not. She was like, "Oh my gosh, Sydney, I can't believe you had this baby." And she's like, "I'm so sorry I didn't make it." And I was like, "I just
Well,
don't
here's
even
the
know what."
other thing I like to say in those situations, because sometimes I get worried about like, what if I have two clients go into labor at the same time? Or what if I'm sick? Like I recently got sick, but was on call for
Mhm.
a birth. And so, you know, you can get worried and anxious about that. But I always have to go back to God is sovereign over every
Mhm.
situation and over every birth. And He knows who He needs at each birth. And
Yeah.
even though, you
Yeah.
know, your doula wasn't at your birth, I'm sure she was helpful to you and played a part in your pregnancy and in your prenatal, and then probably visited you postpartum and was able to stay in contact with you and all of that, which
Mhm.
was wonderful. But it's like the Lord knows who is supposed to be in that room when that baby is born.
Mhm.
And if
Yeah.
she wasn't supposed to be there, then she wasn't supposed to be there. You know, despite our plans, her
Mhm.
role, you know, suited you for a different purpose that wasn't being at the actual birth. And
Yeah.
I think that's okay. And while, knock on wood, I've never missed a birth yet, I'm sure one day it's bound to happen for one reason or another. And I'm just going to have to come back to that the Lord is sovereign over all of that.
Yes, I definitely agree with that. I think that was the redemptive birth that we needed. Just having Drew and I in there, because with Caleb, it was Drew, me, my mom, nurse, and a plethora of doctors and nurses. It was
Right.
so crowded in that room. And then having Nyla and me and Drew, and that was just it. I think it was just meant to be that way, like you said. Like,
So special.
it was something that we needed that was special just between us, even though it was very nerve-wracking.
Yeah.
It happened so fast. It was just all in God's timing and how He needed it to play out for us. And very thankful and beyond blessed with our family and grateful.
Well, what a story, Sidney.
Oh.
What a story. Thank you. Thank you for sharing.
Yes. Thank you for letting me share.
Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. You can reach me at Surrendered Birth Services on Instagram or email me at contact@surrenderedbirthservices.com. Be sure not to miss an episode by hitting the follow button. Also, we'd love for you to leave a written review of the show so that more people's births and lives can be changed by the love of Jesus and the empowerment of accurate birth education. If you really enjoyed this episode in particular, please take a screenshot of it and post it to your Instagram story, tagging Surrendered Birth Services. If you would like to be a guest on the Surrendered Birth Stories podcast, please click the link in the episode show notes to fill out your interest form. Also, if you're interested in taking my childbirth classes, birth consultations, or having me as your birth doula, please click on the link in the show notes to take you to my website for online and in-person options. Just as a reminder, this show is not giving medical advice, so please continue to see your personal care provider as needs arise. We hope you have a great week, and remember, learn all that you can, make the best plans, and then leave it in God's hands. Sorry that took a second longer. I went to go warm up my coffee, and I saw everyone with pumpkin pie, and I was like, I want some of that.